Hi, everybody. Christy Giannoni back with our Week 4 multimedia discussion for MPA540, Public Personnel Management. This week, we're taking a look at generational diversity, how we identified with some of the information in Dr. Sundstrom's lecture and the stereotypical characteristics of the generation that we fall into, interaction with other individuals that fall into different generations, and how it can affect management strategies in the workplace. So I am Generation Y, better known as a millennial. And so when I first saw the assignment for this week, I was laughing because a couple years back, I actually did a quote unquote token millennial Halloween costume. So that is me there with my bubble wrap jacket and fragile stickers because, we're very sensitive, and my Ugg boots and my avocado toast and my attitude very visible on my face. And so it was funny when I first entered my current agency, the millennial conversation was very big, and it was kind of where a lot of the Generation Y was entering the workforce. And now I believe that, with Gen Z entering the workforce, they're taking a little bit of pressure off of millennials. But there is a couple characteristics that I do identify with. I think especially that work-life balance. I think with every generation, the individuals that were at home and what they were watching their parents do, you take that and you adjust of what you want to do and what you want to do a little bit differently. And so, there's a lot that I think is a great characteristics of Generation Y, especially with being raised with technology and that efficiency and the ability to adjust and adapt in a way that prior generations didn't have because the technology just didn't exist. And so a lot of the trainings that I do as an HR professional when it talks about generations, I do think some of the characteristics are very exaggerated, are very stereotypical, not in a great way. So I don't think that laziness component is there. I think there are just different motivational factors. And I was raised by baby boomers. So both my parents were born in the 50s. And there were similar characteristics that I saw in them that were addressed in the lecture. And so one of those being that salary motivator, right? And that retention, what's going to keep somebody there being that salary. I also noticed that they got a little bit of the generation prior to them where that, feeling protected at your job, that you're going to be able to maintain it. That was something that my parents spoke to me about for the advantage of working for the public sector, right? Getting into that CalPERS retirement, getting to be in a job where it's really hard to fire you because you have property rights to your job and some of those other aspects. So there is big differences, when I've talked to my parents, once I entered the workforce, they really wanted me to make sure that I, bought a home. They had a lot of pride in that personal growth of owning things. And so that was something that we had discrepancies on where I was like, well, I don't know where I want to buy a house because California is changing and maybe I'll go somewhere else or won't stay in this area. And so longevity, which is something that I'll talk about in a couple other slides, is also a factor that is a very big discrepancy in from what I see in Gen Y and this baby boomer generation. So let's talk a little bit about diversity in the workplace, specifically with the generations. I think that there are different developing management strategies that we can take a look at. And I do think that, your workforce needs to be managed differently, but not necessarily when it comes to generation specific things. There will never really be a one size fits all management strategy, even if we're looking at equitable practices. And so you really need to look at the needs of your workforce, right? And so Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a great example. Survival would be tied to, base salary. Can I just live off of what I'm earning? Safety can be that retention factor, right? Especially that's something that we talked about in the pandemic, that people were losing their jobs in the private sector and some cities were laying off people in the public sector. When we take a look at the workforce in general, something that we saw as a change kind of around the time of Taylor and that scientific management, in the beginning, we really needed those workhorse people. It was about muscle, it was about physically working, in factories and just production, just that big, actual hands-on workforce. And then that started to change with the management being emphasized. And so we were taking a look at intellect, at analyzing factors, emphasis on education and the manager kind of style. I believe now with this younger workforce coming in, I think it's a little bit of Gen Y and Gen Z, it's kind of about heart. It's that feeling of what's this company providing to me? Am I making a difference in my everyday workplace? Are they giving me, that work-life balance, allowing me to work from home, allowing me to leave early for my kids' practice, these various factors. And that's where that belonging and that self-esteem, self-actualization come in. And so I think we have seen that change. And good managers and good leaders are going to take a look at Victor Vroom. What a great name, by the way. The expectancy theory of motivation. What's really motivating your employees? And that has to do with a lot of different factors outside of our control, right? The economic, climate of what's happening. 9/11, some of these factors, is there an economic crash that's coming or has happened? That's going to give us different motivations. And I think that's what good managers do. And I don't always know that it's necessarily tied to generation, but I do believe that what has happened in that person's lifespan, and especially where they are in their career, is going to make a difference. So some of the management strategies that we can take a look at is adjusting how we operate and avoiding organizational failures as longevity changes. So I think that's one of the biggest things I have seen as somebody who does recruitments. People just don't stay at places as long as they used to. It's not uncommon that someone's somewhere for 3 to 5 years versus somebody who used to stay at a company for 20, plus years, and that was the average. People are moving around. They're looking for those motivational needs, right? Is this company going to allow me to have that work-life balance? Am I going to feel that my boss understands me and my needs? But when individuals leave and they take that institutional knowledge, if we don't have steps in place for those processes and procedures, we really do create that organizational failure where we're not functioning. And then we want to create a climate for engagement, not just for opportunities of employees to be engaged at work, but for management engaging in active areas for feedback, right? So that's where you want your benefits, your personnel department to be talking to the workforce and seeing what's motivating them. That's really where you see those generational differences stand out, because an individual who is closer to retirement age or just entering the workforce is going to have very different short-term and long-term goals. And then we want to avoid that poor people management. I think the textbook talked about some great things that, mistakes that managers can make, not getting to know your employees as people, failing to listen, failing to react to problems. And so that's something that good managers will have to strategize to do. And as individuals' motivations and needs change, regardless of whether that's from generational diversity or not, that's where managers have to step in and take action. All right, great topic. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Thank you and have a very blessed week.